It's a privilege to be able to be at Sundance and be in U.S. dramatic competition with a film that is as raw and as organic and as us as we can possibly be.
So, Esteban, just to start things off, this film is set in a very specific moment in Colombia's recent history.
Yeah.
Just what sort of reverberations and what substance does that moment have for you as a filmmaker and as a human being?
For my personal story, 1999 was the year when I moved here. But when I got here, I started meeting a lot of Colombians in South Florida that, for the same reasons, which was political turmoil or just in search of opportunity, came here. And we didn't really have a chance to go back. So we just assimilated into the culture and evolved and became a hybrid, So it was set in that time because of, when we moved, that was a different era, like communications were digital communications were in its infancy. So keeping in touch with your friends and culture in general was just a challenge. So you had to cut ties for good and move forward. So that's what we wanted for this film, to make that journey a little bit harder.
And for the other Colombian actors here, what's your relationship to this moment? And being from, different generations, what was your relationship to the story as a whole?
I think we had a very similar experience because we come from Colombian parents, but I was born in Atlanta. So it's kind of like this middle ground. Our first language was Spanish, and, having to adapt in the culture in the States, it's a very similar experience that we went through, that the characters go through in the film.
Yeah, me and Mateo are brothers, and apparently I taught him English. Yeah, I would say it's similar to Esteban's story, but also very different. We have a sort of, the Spanish that we learned is from our home, from literally our home, our house.
Mm-hmm.
Going to Colombia, last year was here with Monos, and that was a immersive experience with a bunch of Colombian actors, and then this was sort of a different take on that experience. We're in the city of Bogota, and playing with accents, English accents, playing with the Spanish accents to make sure that everything was period and correct. And it was a learning experience. It caused a lot of fighting between Mateo and me because the film has a lot of tension in between the brothers, and I don't think that the film could have been made without this relationship that Mateo and I have.
Yeah, well, for me, it was kind of like a journey into acceptance and accepting myself and my personal story. I connected so much with Esteban's story because my family also emigrated from Colombia to the States, and we've had issues with immigration, and that has been such a huge part of my life and such a huge part of my work. I was so afraid at first to tell any story that was too similar to mine, but like Moy said, it was different, and that was so refreshing about it, and I think that's what brought me even closer to myself and to my family and to wanting to tell more stories like this. It was kind of really a mission of love. I look at footage that I just took on my own, and it just opened up another world for me. I wanted to run away from stories like this. I wanted to run away from my language, from who I am, from who I was. And now that's gone. I want to continue acting in Spanish and different languages. I want to bring more stories like this to light, and yeah.
Well, Wilmer, I'm curious about your perspective. You've done so many English language projects. How you feel about working in the Spanish language now?
Yeah, I in many ways, we all share the same sentiment, right? My parents actually sold everything they had in Venezuela in the mid-90s, early 90s, to come to America, and we also had to cut everything from the root. One day we had friends in the neighborhood, and we had our school, and my mom had her girlfriends, and my dad had his boy who got to have a drink with, and then one day, completely new existence, page one, rewrite, right? And that is a sacrifice that parents make in order to give the shot at the kids to have the education that they never had, or an opportunity they most likely will never have back home. And coming full circle like this, one of my first experiences for this was when I did Fast Food Nation with Richard Linklater. And that was my first time playing a Mexican, immigrant who crossed the border and took a job at a slaughterhouse. And that changed my life. And, I had to also perfect the Mexican accent and do all that stuff because I'm Colombian, Venezuelan as well. In coming full circle, to be able to be at a generation where you can tell your stories, but not just tell your stories the way Hollywood would have in the last 2 decades. Tell your stories in the language that was the sound and the white noise of in The Fly on the Wall that saw that happening. It's incredibly special, and it's a privilege to be able to be at Sundance and be in U.S. dramatic competition with a film that is as raw and as organic and as us as we can possibly be. And unapologetically saying, like, read little subtitles. Here's Spanish, but it's not just Spanish. It's this beautiful culture that really hasn't had the chance to be on screen. So I was very passionate to be in this movie, and I love his vision from the first meeting, and I knew it was going to be special.
Daniel, how do you relate to the themes of the film and some of the issues that we're talking about here?
Well, I may not be Colombian, but I certainly
But
have.
you look it.
That's the nicest compliment I've heard all day. No, but I was born outside of America. My story is an immigrant story, and I related to this on many levels because it's not just the Latinx community, it's the Asian community, it's the African community. We all share these stories about being American, and this is about the fabric of America. And so, it's the kind of story I want to be a part of. I'm proud to be a part of this movie, and it's just the kind of story I think is worth telling. I also think that what's really important about this movie is that it's not just about where you're from, it's about the prejudgments we make about what you look like or what kind of music you listen to. And I think that was really important to, to the kind of story we're telling. When these guys were metalheads, even in my own head, I thought, okay, so this is going to go a certain way. But, the movie's so clever and thoughtful in that it talks about stereotypes beyond race. So it's something that, like Wilmer said, I'm super proud to be a part of. And we've been around the block a little bit. So we can pick and choose some things, and this is definitely one worth choosing.
So, pivoting off of that, how do you think the opportunities have changed since you got into this game in terms of the sort of gigs that people think you're right for and what they bring to your agents and so on?
You can tell that there is a subliminal agenda from a lot of the studios and a subliminal agenda from TV studios. They are feeling the urgency and the critical moment and where their business is being threatened by not being able to invite the communities that are watching the movies every weekend, that are tuning into appointment TV. So there is definitely a race on who's going to actually find, the recipe, who's got the sauce to actually really organically invite an audience to create the brand loyalty they've always wanted. So I've seen, in the last 2+ decades that, we've been doing this, the slow giant waking up, right? Saying like, whoa, that's cool you're including us, but that's not how we sound. And so, and what I mean by that metaphorically is that all across the board, from a director's voice to the screenwriter's ability to have access to the origin story, but have a co-partnership in how you write something, the producer that should really do the research and travel to the areas the story takes place. It's an ecosystem of things that have to fine-tune, but I really do believe there is a generation right now waking up in Hollywood that understands that there are no rules in storytelling, and that your ability to be mainstream is also your ability to be organically rooted into what's true. And so I think, a very wordy answer to basically say that in the generation that I grew up with in entertainment and that we've been a part of, to have the front seat to see when we were the only people ethnic and mainstream, we were the tokens in television and in film, to now see that the paradigm has shifted is very special.
Yeah, I think the key word is organic. There's an organic authenticity now that is allowed.
That's right.
Before, maybe 10 years ago, if you wanted to tell an immigrant story, it would have been a white guy who was friends with an immigrant family. Mm-hmm. But now you have, people from Colombia telling a specifically Colombian story. from the writer to the director to the actors, and me being the odd man out. But you know, and you have venues like Sundance that wants to hear and showcase those kinds of stories. I think that's a big difference.
Esteban, to bring it back to the filmmaking side of things, hearing all of these issues being discussed, how does that affect the kinds of films you want to continue telling, the kind of people that you want to put on screen?
I'm super stoked about it because like those are the stories that I can tell because I can only tell stories from an honest point of view. And you know, I keep having meetings around town where, you know, executives just want more of these. So that's definitely exciting for our careers because we can keep doing what honestly feels good to us. You know, the types of stories that we want to see. But also it feels like around me there's other filmmakers that just keep pushing each other to be better and just compete at a level of craft that doesn't have anything to envy with, you know, world-class filmmaking. So we're right there. I mean, we're here in U.S. dramatic competition and we're super proud of that.
You know, at IndieWire, we really like to celebrate the craft of filmmaking on every level, and we've been asking people who are sort of the essential people you keep around you, not necessarily in front of the camera, but the folks that kind of help make sure that every aspect of the technique of your filmmaking is sort of covered.
Well, first and foremost, my writing partner, Eric Castrillon. We grew up playing in bands together since we were teenagers. And so we know each other intimately, and you know, through the writing process, we just keep honing in the honesty and you know, making those stories better. Then there's Ed Wu, our cinematographer, who is a badass. It's the kind of person that would just go the mile to get the shot and make it great. Then there's, you know, the people that I do the sound mix with in New York, Diego Jimenez and the guys from Hobo. We also met when I was a teenager playing metal. And it's those kinds of relationships that you foster for years and years that you almost have like an unspoken understanding with, you know, at a level where everything just feels like comes out from the ether, you know, and materializes through just a common goal. I feel like that's such an important thing for artists to nurture, is just create that village to just keep doing stuff together and growing your craft.
What's your secret to kind of keeping everybody on task?
Involving everybody creatively, you know. I feel like you have to ask them questions and, you know, what's their take on a certain decision, because you never know what kind of surprises will come, you know.
Allow him to, allow us to ask him questions. I think
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
huge. You know, whenever I feel intimidated to, you know, ask a stupid question, then I think that that's a problem.
Right.
Esteban also kills with kindness. Good to know.
Good
Like
skill.
in this age of not so great people in this business, it's good to know that there are directors like him out there, and an ensemble like this that makes it a happy set.
So this is a little off topic, but it feels relevant because you brought it up earlier. I want to talk about Monos for a second, because unfortunately the movie isn't part of the Oscar conversation right now, but it certainly did become a real talking point starting this time last year at Sundance. How did you feel about being a part of that film and the kind of attention that it brought to Colombian cinema as a whole?
Oh, it's amazing, man. I mean, even coming back this year and so many people sort of that were unaware of the picture last year, and then this year being like, yo, I saw the film, and yeah, I was here last year when you were speaking about it. It was definitely the toughest thing I've ever experienced, and I probably wouldn't sign up to anything like it again, but it's probably the you know, the film that mostly taught me what sort of stories I want to be a part of. And yeah, it was my first time working in South America and working in the language, and it was a lot of preparation, and I'm very happy with how people responded to it. I think that
He stopped talking to me for 3 months, by the way.
Yes.
While he was shooting that film. He didn't want to speak English to anybody.
Yes.
And he came back with a sort of like, there was a certain energy to him when he came back. There was like a darker side to him.
And I'm
that
sweating.
I didn't quite
My
understand.
palms are sweating. Yeah, that film is just really special, and you know, I'm happy with how far in the discussion it got in terms of, you know, its artistic beauty and sort of message too. It's a subtle, underlying, heavy message that should be discussed.
There's a funny story around it because
Yes, actually.
you know, Santiago, one of the producers of Monos, kind of reached out to me after he saw Blast Beat the Short, curious about, you know, connecting with Moises for this movie. And so when he went away to do that movie and came back, I called Santiago, hey, how did you guys do? Tell me about it. He's like, oh man, we almost died. A mountain just came down on us after a heavy rainfall. I'm like, dude, don't kill him. I still have to shoot my movie.